Hello, it's Scott Manley here with part 17 of Kerbal Spaceships, our serious business. When we last left you, we were heading off towards the moon with a newer, bigger, faster, more powerful rocket. Basically, it had more delta V than anything else. And the plan was, of course, to send this to the moon, land it on the moon. This is what we have here. So, currently, we're burning using a cryogenic stage here, right? This is the closed cycle Kerbal engine from the Russian technology labs, and now we switch over to a rather more pedestrian AJ-10, which uses storable propellant, which is ideal because of course we're going to need our propellant to not evaporate while we're cruising our way to the moon. While the Soviet cryogenic engine is obviously way better, we wouldn't be able to use it once we actually get to the moon, so we have to sacrifice performance for being able to use it. So yeah, a little bit of adjusting here. We're going to fly past the moon and then we perform the orbital insertion. So the orbital insertion, well, it's far from ideal. Our periaps is 390 kilometers. From here, we get ourselves set up to turn around and then enable the avionics on all the spacecraft. You see that we actually have multiple spacecraft or multiple probe bodies here attached to this because the final stage is actually built around a Ranger probe core. Now, the Rangers never actually landed on the moon. Well, I mean, I think they impacted the moon, but they were never designed to soft land on the moon. That was what the Surveyor probes did. But the first spacecraft to soft land on the moon was Luna 9, which was a Russian design. Anyway, on paper, this thing should have enough delta V, although it will entirely depend upon how well I fly it. So we're getting ourselves lined up, we're going to perform our lunar injection. There we go. Now, all we're trying to do is put ourselves into an elliptical orbit around the moon, on only just here. So I fired the engine and then I complete the burn using the reaction control system. The reason is I want to make sure I burn the reaction control system dry, essentially. The RCS uses hydrazine monopropellant, therefore the specific impulse isn't particularly efficient, so therefore you want to use it up first before you switch over to, before you burn up the higher efficiency, stored propellants in this first stage here, powering that AJ-10. Oh yeah, and you can see the Earth in the background there. I've carefully put this orbit in such a way that we will be attempting to land on the side with the Earth facing us because, of course, we haven't really got our communication satellites set up correctly. And I haven't got Kerbal operating system or anything installed. I am going to try landing this thing with a 1.5 second signal delay. I'm sure I can do that. I mean, Luna 9, it actually landed on airbags at about 20 kilometers per hour and skipped across the surface a few times because, the the electronic systems that they were developing at the time were still very, very primitive. In fact, several previous Luna spacecraft had obviously tried and failed to land. Luna 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 were all supposed to be landers and they all failed. But there was actually a number of others which don't even have spacecraft names because they were supposed to be Luna spacecraft and then they didn't even launch correctly. They ended up burning up. So I don't know how much stuff they threw at the moon. But yes, we're about to throw something at the moon. This is us performing the end of this final burn here. We're just soaking up the end of this these little reaction thrusters. And once those are done, we're going to start our descent burn here. And this is where it really starts to get fun. Okay, now we're on final approach. This is where we really find out whether we have enough fuel. Now look, total delta V, 1900, 1800. Look at my actual velocity here, my orbital velocity, 1500, 1400. These numbers are really, really close here. We have about 50 meters per second more delta V than we have in orbit. So, let's see how we do. Getting ready to start burning those engines at exactly the right time. We are going to hit the moon here. The question is, how fast are we going to hit the moon? So I'm watching my delta V decrease here. You see, well, what I'm seeing here is delta V stats shows We're about to pass 1,000. 1,000. Okay, so we're still 50 meters per second in excess, which is good. You can see the Luna Tick-Tock probe. Yes, I called this the Luna Tick-Tock. No, I'm not implying that the guidance system is clockwork, but that would be a pretty cool concept. I think the V1 guidance system was pretty close to being clockwork, or about as close to being clockwork as you could imagine for a guided munition. Okay, 800, 854, we are moving very slowly here, but I think we're still in the green here. So now we're coming, I'm just looking at the landing numbers here. It says, I'm not going to use landing guidance here, I'm just using the numbers on it, right? Because what that's going to give me is time to impact. Right, so when we get the appropriate number, we'll know how long we have, right? So I want to make sure the time to impact is pretty close to the burn time that I have left on the spacecraft, obviously. If the time to impact ends up getting significantly less than my burn time, given how close my, my delta V is, then I'm probably going to crash into the ground before I run out of fuel. Whereas, if the time to impact gets significantly higher, then odds are I'm going to run out of fuel and still be too high above the surface. Okay. Uh-oh. Wait. Look. This is not good. So my total delta V estimate is now... Oh, crap. Okay. Well, this looks like we might be doomed. So my delta V is going down faster than my actual velocity, and I'm not sure why. I think I can guess why. It's because you can see the little puffs from the reaction motors there. So just simply keeping this thing on target is using more fuel that would be far better used to be slowing us down. There's still a small chance that we're going to slow down sufficiently and soft land this thing, but I think this might be one of those accidental impactors. Oh, look, the sun's rising. We'll enjoy it because the sun's about to set in a second. Yep, there we go. Yep, sun about to set. Falling into a crater, and we are down to less than 100 meters per second. We're going to hit the ground at something like 50 meters per second here. This is a good attempt. It was a fine attempt even. I was pretty impressed, but oh, no, here we go. And our velocity is several hundred kilometers per hour. At this point, I wonder whether there'll be anything recognizable left for the museums of the future when we come to, of course, return to the moon and find out what things look like. Bang! Is there anything? Oh, look, yeah, there's a little debris field or whatever flying away. Solar panels flying out, experiencing their love of flying for the last time. Yep, things exploding, and yes. Well, I guess we need another couple of 100 meters per second of delta V there, or a better pilot. I think I might have screwed up my transfer burn. I don't know. There will be an inquiry, and there will be another attempt. Meanwhile, back at base, we've invented a new technology, or rather, a new technology has been added to the mod. That of the camera system. So this allows you to take pictures, and I've just basically strapped a couple of cameras on top of a solid rocket booster. This is a procedural solid rocket, and it's about as big as I can build, and it is just basically carrying the cameras up. You can see the little display there with the science alert telling me that I have science. I'm going to wait until I get higher so that I can actually collect useful science. Obviously, science from aircraft altitude isn't that interesting. So yeah, film return camera, photographing stuff. Tell us all about what you have photographed. And then we jettison our payload for continued exploration. So yeah, the first photographs taken of the Earth from space, I believe were using a V2 rocket back in 1946. But it's like straight after the war. Von Braun gets brought out, and they take a rocket and they stick a camera on it, and it goes up like higher than anything else. You can see the curvature of the Earth from the altitude. I think previously they'd only be able to use balloons, so a rocket was way better. Anyway, we get some photographs from space at last. Seen here in each frame, the photo, where one frame is equal to a day, it shows how water vapor produced at the equator continuously transports the energy of the sun towards the poles. Yes, obviously designed for cameras in orbit, and I have completely abused this system by not putting my camera in orbit. But the cameras are still being returned. That's one of the features of the camera experiment. You pretty much have to return the early versions to Earth, because that's what they did in the old days. They would send the rocket up, it would take pictures, and then they would develop the pictures on Earth. And then later on, they get better. They actually managed to develop the film while in space, and then they would photograph that and send it back. But actual, cameras with photographic film were used for a long time. Anyway, back at base, another milestone is achieved. The construction team finally finishes their long-awaited upgrade of the Research and Development Center. So now we're going to be able to research bigger and better and more fancier things for the future space program. Such as this Orbital camera project. Yeah, look, we just took a simple launcher and we're now going to send a camera into space and then keep it there for a while. Now this is going to be something similar to the Corona missions, which were really the first spy satellites that were actually launched by Americans. A lot of people think that Russia or the Soviets did all the early firsts in space travel. No, the Americans were the first people to put a spy satellite up that works. At least from what we can tell, there's been nothing declassified. The Corona stuff was declassified in the mid-90s, I believe. Now, the Soviets actually started developing their spy satellite at the same time as they started developing Vostok. In fact, Vostok, the spacecraft design, is identical to Zenit. I think they originally had the same Vostok codename, but when the press started talking about Vostok, they thought maybe we should change the name a little. So yeah, there's another interesting thing I'm doing here. This is the ship's manifest mod. What I can do with this is I can copy the data from the camera into the science container, and that means I can reuse my film return camera. Actually, I'm not sure how I should be able to use my film return camera because it is inside a shroud at this point. Perhaps something for the developers of the mod to think about. Nevertheless, I'm copying this into a capsule. If you have stock realism projection, it'll actually say in the part description that you can, use a film return capsule. But what it doesn't tell you is that isn't a special part. I spent forever looking for that, and then I asked the guys in the channel, and they said, yeah, just use ship manifest and build your own return capsule. Actually, I believe the term capsule is totally inappropriate because it's not like a space capsule. It's more a bucket. In fact, I believe that is the technical term that was used to describe the film return vehicle. So I'm putting this into a polar orbit, and from here it's able to just grab stuff as it flies over. So we're just going to keep this in the corner there, and as and when we see stuff that's worth tracking, we will copy it over and make sure that it ends up in the capsule. So we've got a cryogenic upper stage here again. And for the rest of the spacecraft, we have just little small hydrazine-based monopropellant thrusters, just enough to circularize the orbit and return the spacecraft. I kind of like the look of this one, to be honest. We have that big camera in the middle, and then a couple of Ranger cores on both ends, just to provide support, make it look like an interesting-looking spacecraft or something. I don't know. Of course, I'm comparing this to a spy satellite when the first spacecraft to take pictures from orbit was a weather satellite, the Tyros 1 satellite, and they had TV cameras that were used to take pictures of cloud patterns, which of course, was kind of the genesis of modern weather forecasting using satellites. That was a pretty public, civilian program. Corona was actually called the Discoverer program, and it was military classified stuff, and they didn't actually explain what they were doing. It wasn't until years later that was declassified that we actually found the full details of what was going on. A large blaze raging its way through the grasslands can be seen with frightening clarity at the center of this image. Of course, that's obviously predicting what the scientists will see when they actually take the film, recover the film and develop it. Island mountains disturb the otherwise fairly uniform airflow over the ocean, creating V shapes in the clouds. The stripes in the wakes are crests and troughs of the airflow. The poles remain Earth's last great wilderness, a vast frozen emptiness plunged in darkness and bad grammar. It's amazing how much science we've already collected, and we still aren't even in a stable orbit. But now that we are approaching apoapse, that's time for us to fix that. Little bit of rocket burn just to bring the periapse up just outside the atmosphere and no more. Although the Corona missions were actually flown at really, really low altitudes. I think some of them were in stable orbits at about 75 miles, which is just, crazy. The satellites wouldn't be expected to last very long, but they just needed to make enough passes over interesting bits of the Soviet Union that they would hit something interesting, I would imagine. Now, obviously, I'm putting this on an eccentric orbit because I'm too lazy to circularize it and I'm not actually working in the National Reconnaissance Office. I therefore don't require exactly circular orbits and careful adjustment of, all sorts of things. The original Corona design, incidentally, was supposed to rotate to be spin stabilized, and it would rotate along its perpendicular to its orbit axis, I believe. And the cameras would be set up that they would only snap a picture when they were facing down at the right location and it was daytime. But then the developers, they looked into the problem and they actually invented a proper 3-axis stabilization system that could hold it in the correct orientation. The later versions of Corona also added 2 cameras so that they could they would take one as they were approaching an object and then one as they were leaving the area, and then they would combine them, and you would of course get a 3D effect that would let you basically see the details a little better, let everything kind of pop off the page. I'm sure the analysts really appreciated it. Seen here is a daily pulse of dust rising off the desert. It's visible as a whitish dust cloud lifting from the desert with clockwork regularity. The dust cloud is over 200 miles wide by estimate. So you get the idea here. We're in a polar orbit. We're essentially looking for any biome that will trigger thanks to Science Alert. We need to stay up for about 12 hours so that we cover most of the Earth. Obviously, 24 hours would be a full rotation, but you have to realise we're going up and down. Aha! Below, thousands of miles of almost virgin forest. Anyway, eventually my patience wears thin and I decide to call it a day. So the recovery process for this is actually kind of interesting. First of all, I'm going to take the parachutes in this pod here. You may note that we do not have heat shields for the entire spacecraft. And we don't have very much on the end. The little capsule is that bit on the end. It has no propulsion. It has a pair of heat shields and it has a parachute, which I'm going to arm while still in orbit. Right, there we go. Bring it up. So the parachute is now armed. We're pointed in the correct direction. And if I decouple this thing, it should give me enough impulse that I will descend through the atmosphere. Let's see how this does. And about 90 kilometers, that is more than acceptable. We will eventually return to the Earth. The question is, where? And then, as we slow down and fall down far enough, the parachutes will open automatically and this thing should land successfully, returning its package of scientific, data, scientific or intelligence, depending upon who picks it up first. Fun thing about the Corona spacecraft, so the return pods, they had 1 or 2 of them depending upon the satellite design, and those would be captured under parachute while they were in midair. They would try to pluck them out of the air. There would be a special aircraft which had, it was kind of like a big U-shaped hook, and the idea would be it would snag the parachutes, and then they would be able to reel the capsule up. And, then, of course, it would never touch the ground. They knew the chain of custody was good and that the data could be trusted and it wouldn't fall into enemy hands. Although there is a rumor that the first bucket returned from space was actually captured by the Russians, but there's no evidence on the Russian side to actually support this hypothesis. Also worth noting, this is an idiot-proof return pod. It's not an idiot, it's designed by an idiot. No, it's an idiot-proof return pod because it has 2 heat shields, because I wasn't sure which way would be aerodynamically stable, so I put heat shields on both sides and hoped that the thing would survive re-entry, and it looks to be doing a pretty good job, if I do say so myself. So they're 30 kilometers up and slowing down. So we can now ditch these things because we actually have signal here. Without signal, the thing would probably still work, but I'm just deciding to ditch the case because why not? We're headed for the ocean. We're not going to try and capture it in midair because that would be insanely difficult. And yeah, that data will no doubt be incredibly useful and interesting and scientific and lead us to new and better things for future episodes. Until then, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.